From APM, American Public Media.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Law Firm. Malignant mesothelioma. Asbestos dust causes this cancer. Learn more from board-certified civil trial specialist Wayne Hogan at waynehogan.law.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect with Melissa Ross. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Opinions expressed on the Friday Media Roundtable are those of our panelists and do not necessarily reflect the views of WJCT News.
It's the biggest stories from the week. I'm Melissa Ross, and just ahead this hour on First Coast Connect, a look at the week's top stories with our Friday Roundtable. As a local civil rights activist heads to Europe to speak at the United Nations, local school board candidates go head-to-head during a forum at the beaches, and the Jaguars play their first game as Tony Baselli is inducted into the Hall of Fame. Those stories and more just ahead here on the show, plus later in the hour, how the Jack's Next 100 is adding a lot of life to the Jesse Ball DuPont Center next week, how you can be part of it. Keep listening. It's all coming your way right after the news.
And the time right now is 9:01. Good Friday morning. I'm Jamie Jackson. Emergency managers are simplifying the messaging around evacuation orders as some existing terms fall out of use. Knowing when you're in danger and when to evacuate is critical ahead of the most active period of the hurricane season. Melissa Fato with the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network has more.
You might have heard the term voluntary or mandatory attached to an evacuation order. While some counties do use these terms, many county emergency managers are now choosing to forego that distinction to avoid miscommunication, like John McDonald, Director of Emergency Management for Levy County.
Here, typically, I just call them evacuations. That cuts out a lot of confusion because we're going to open up a shelter anyways.
McDonald said it's important to understand any evacuation order is not issued lightly, and getting one means you are in the path of danger. Elizabeth Estrada is emergency manager of the University of Miami Health System. She says under a mandatory evacuation, nobody will remove you from your home, but you will be on your own.
If you choose to stay and you call 911 and the winds have gone up, we are not sending fire rescue for you. You chose to stay, so now you're choosing to take the risk upon yourself and your family.
Estrada emphasizes that whatever course of action you take, to have a plan and not wait until the last minute. The Florida Division of Emergency Management urges all Floridians to know what evacuation zone they reside in. Typically, zones are evacuated starting with A and ending in F. The division highly recommends all Florida residents pay attention to warnings from their local officials. I'm Melissa Fato.
Right now in Jacksonville, 81 degrees for your Friday, partly sunny with a high near 88. A 30% chance of showers and thunderstorms mainly after 12 noon today. Tonight, a 10% chance of showers and thunderstorms before 8 p.m. Time right now is 9:03. I'm Jamie Jackson. This is WJCT News, 89.9 Jacksonville.
A local civil rights activist heads to Geneva to speak before a committee of the UN. Local school board candidates go head-to-head during a candidate forum. And the Jaguars play their first game as Tony Baselli is set to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Some of the stories making headlines this week. Good Friday morning. We're live from Studio 5. I'm Melissa Ross, and this is First Coast Connect. Thanks for listening. Just ahead, all the top stories of the week with our Friday Roundtable. Join us, 549-2937. Then later, we'll tell you about the Jack's Next 100 next week at the Jesse Ball DuPont Center. All of that ahead, but first it's Friday, and here to discuss a busy week in the news, we welcome Dan Scanlon of the Florida Times-Union. Good morning.
Good morning.
Mike Mendenhall of the Jax Daily Record.
Good morning, Melissa.
Claire Heddles, enterprise reporter at our own Jax Today.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Claire. And joining us virtually, local writer Shelton Hull. Hi, Shelton.
Good morning.
Good to have all four of you on the show. Lots to talk about this week. We'll go to your calls in a moment at 549-2937. Let's begin with our top story. Jacksonville activist Ben Frazier is taking his fight for civil rights in Florida to a global audience. Frazier, the founder of the Northside Coalition of Jacksonville, will speak next week in Geneva, Switzerland, before a committee of the United Nations. This UN committee to eliminate racial discrimination is dedicated to monitoring human rights violations around the world. Frazier says he's been asked to speak in Geneva because the Northside Coalition is a plaintiff in a lawsuit challenging Florida's anti-riot bill.
So let's be clear. This is no small potato matter. We are violating international law. The governor is perpetuating racial discrimination. Discrimination is any restriction which has the purpose of stifling human rights and fundamental freedoms. So then, this governor has launched an all-out racially discriminatory attacks on black people, people of color. He's trying to turn back the hands of time, trying to stifle the progress of the civil rights movement. So we're asking the world to take a closer look at what DeSantis is doing. In my home state, Florida, black people still being treated as second-class citizens by the criminal justice system, by law enforcement, walking, driving, breathing while black. It's time for this country. It's time for its leaders, including DeSantis, to straighten up and fly right. Now, either we are serious about what we've signed with regards to these treaties, or we're just saying one thing and doing another. Blacks are still being targeted and victimized by racist laws that strike at the very core and mission of the United Nations, equity, dignity, and human rights. It's time for us to straighten up and fly right.
The United States is a signatory to an international treaty pledging to end racial discrimination around the world. When Frazier speaks in Geneva, he'll not only talk about Florida's anti-riot bill, which is being challenged in court, but new voting restrictions, an election security force, laws banning the teaching of critical race theory in K through 12 schools, even though it wasn't being taught to begin with, or the redrawing of congressional districts in Florida, which are eliminating minority access districts. Frazier is expected to frame all of what's happening on the ground in Florida as part of a series of human rights violations here in the Sunshine State. He'll do this before an international audience. What are your thoughts about this? Give us a call. 549-2937 to join our roundtable. Emails to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Tweets to @MelissaInJax. Dan Scanlon, let's begin with you. You covered this as well. In January of this year, Ben Frazier, who's 72 years old and uses an electric wheelchair, was handcuffed and arrested at a news conference that was being held by the governor at the Duval County Health Department because he demanded to speak with the governor about some of these issues. A trespass charge against him was later dropped.
I was there when that happened, and the reason behind it is because he was in a state public building. If this had been a news conference somewhere else or out in the parking lot, it may not have been an issue. But he was there with a group of other protesters to talk about the fact that the governor's COVID-19 plans did not properly address underserved black neighborhoods. And he was then hustled out with his wheelchair separately. So he was in pain and then put in the back of a police cruiser. And then ultimately, when he and Attorney John Phillips stated that they were planning to sue, the charges were dropped. He never did get to meet with the governor as was promised, or at least mentioned at the event. And my story on this trip to Geneva just popped on Jacksonville.com. I had a lovely conversation with him last night. He's actually boiling this down to the fact that this whole thing that the governor is doing in Florida is a violation of a 1994 U.S. entry into an international treaty calling for the elimination of racism, which is one of the things that this UN conference monitors on an annual basis.
That's right. Shelton Hull, The Committee of the UN has published a list of themes for its upcoming review of policies in the United States, looking at things like addressing the impact of gun violence on ethnic minorities in America, measures to address systemic racism in law enforcement, measures that are preventing full voting rights, which have a discriminatory impact on people of African descent, people of color. Talking in particular, the UN committee says about voter ID laws, gerrymandering, closing or moving polling locations, and felon disenfranchisement laws. And then also measures to guarantee the exercise of the right to freedom of peaceful assembly. All themes that Ben Fraser will be touching on in this speech before the UN committee. What about the framing of this? Telling this international audience that Florida is committing human rights violations.
Well, I'm sure the governor and his supporters would disagree with maybe the way Mr. Fraser, describes it to the international audiences. But, that's what happens when, you pick a fight with the media. The fact is the situation with Mr. Fraser was calculated to humiliate him, calculated to make him look bad in front of his audience, and it backfired badly against DeSantis, as with a lot of things he's done. The last few years have seen widespread protests around the country, as you know, about a number of different matters, and Jacksonville happens to be one of the few places in the country that's had pretty consistent results, largely as a result of Mr. Fraser's leadership. And I think that a guy like him with his background in the media, he knows how to explain these things, how to break down, complicated, somewhat boring matters like gerrymandering and such. And I'm sure he'll be a big hit overseas.
Yeah, Claire Heddles, let's talk about what the reaction may be like back here in the United States. Overseas, certainly Ben Fraser will face a receptive audience. Views of the United Nations are more divided here in America.
Right. I mean, the committee next week, or in the next 3 weeks, is hearing from groups from across the country. So I think it is significant that the person representing Florida and representing some of what's happening in Florida is this Jacksonville native, Ben Fraser. It's important to note also that this law, the anti-riot law that, is bringing him to the UN is still undecided. It's still under appeal. A judge ruled it unconstitutional.
The anti-riot law.
The anti-riot law,
bill,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so we don't actually know yet what's going to happen with that. And so I think it might be interesting to see what happens at the UN and how that could influence the judge's eventual decision on whether this law is going to take effect in Florida.
Yeah. Mike Mendenhall, the governor, has appealed a stay on the law. Basically, critics' issue with the law is that they're saying people engaged in peaceful protest, or even if you happen to be nearby where a demonstration turns violent, that you could potentially face criminal charges and stiff penalties. This law was enacted in the wake of widespread Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 after a man was killed on camera by a police officer in Minnesota.
Yeah, that's right, Melissa. I mean, and you saw these Black Lives Matter protests, throughout the country, and also here in Jacksonville, and as you mentioned, most of these protests were the majority of them were peaceful, but you did have these offshoot of folks that were causing some damage to public property, private property, and those protesters that were being peaceful, they are concerned that this bill that this law could end up landing them in jail. I think it's also important to point out too that this Ben Fraser's speech in front of the UN really comes at a time that that's politically sensitive for Ron DeSantis. He's widely expected to run for president. He's right now one of the top presumptive for the GOP nomination, and also too here in Jacksonville really one of the things that the Jax Chamber is trying to do is make an impression on an international stage to attract business and to attract employee talent to Jacksonville. The chamber travels abroad annually to speak with companies, try to recruit companies to come here, and casting a light like this on Jacksonville is can't be beneficial for those types of efforts.
It's not the Chamber of Commerce message, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's an important point. Thank you for that. If you're just tuning in, it's our Media Roundtable where we discuss the top stories of the week. 549-2937 to join us. Okay, let's talk about political races here in Duval. We've got a primary election coming up on August 23rd. In a moment, we'll talk about the sheriff's contest. But first, candidates running for 2 open seats on the Duval County School Board are right in the midst of the nation's culture wars. Elizabeth Anderson is running for re-election in School Board District 2. That is primarily a Southside and Beaches district. She faces a challenge from April Carney, who is affiliated with the conservative group Moms for Liberty. At a school board forum at the Beaches earlier this week, Carney seemed to endorse the idea of arming teachers in the classroom.
There's no better solution to a bad person with a gun than a fully trained good person with a gun.
Elizabeth Anderson also sent campaign mailers out this week across District 2, hitting Carney on rumors that she was part of the rally at the Capitol riot on January 6, 2021. Hundreds of people who stormed the Capitol, including a large number from Florida, are facing charges over that insurrection day. Carney is rumored to have been there. Anderson has sent out a flyer asking April Carney, were you at the January 6th Capitol insurrection? Voters deserve to know. A campaign manager for April Carney has told WJCT News that a photo, which facial recognition software appears to be a match for April Carney at the January 5th Stop the Steal rally in Washington. He told us that the image is of Carney, but that it was taken at a pro-life rally. That conflicts with the information we've received that photo was taken on January 5th in Washington. Dan Scanlon, let's talk about this. April Carney and another candidate, Charlotte Joyce, who we'll talk about in a moment, have both been endorsed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. This is new. These are typically nonpartisan races. No more.
Well, the 29 school board members folks running across the state have been endorsed by the governor of late. And Carney herself also has the endorsement of another known conservative, Congressman John Rutherford, who was our sheriff for many years and widely loved. So that right there shows that there's a partition. She is not a teacher. The incumbent who's running against her is a former teacher. I think those are pretty good street creds to be a school board member. And I'm married to a retired teacher, so I do understand what it takes to be a teacher. I just wonder why the governor's stepping into this endorsement race. He's certainly got enough things on his plate to worry about in a state that has its major pluses and some issues.
Let us know your questions about the local school board races at 549-2937. In the other local contested seat, incumbent Charlotte Joyce is facing re-election. She's being challenged by Tanya Hardiker in District 6. Now, both Anderson and Hardiker are running on a platform of keeping politics out of local school board races. Shelton Hull, is that a winning message? How politicized have these school board races become? We'll wait and see the results, of course, after the primary. But what about how politics and national divisions have become part and parcel of what, were in the past pretty sleepy nonpartisan local races?
Yeah. Well, as to whether it's a winning strategy, I'd say no. It'd be nice if the school board was nonpartisan, but I think that ship sailed when they ran Herb Sang out of town 30 years ago. Since then, I've
now that's a way back reference.
Yeah. I mean, the fact is, and Jacksonville is no worse than anywhere else in the country. The fact is, our education system, the young people in our schools have been used as pawns in the political games of adults for most of our lifetimes. Do they mean well? I'm sure they do mean well, but the results speak for themselves. We've got, the shootings in the schools, poor nutrition in the cafeterias, the bullying and the violence. There are some people like these candidates who may have some good ideas and want to make things happen for the kids in the future. But right now, it's about a governor who is laser focused on the White House. And between now and 2024, it doesn't really matter what anyone on the school board thinks or what they want to do or what the superintendent wants to do or what the teachers want to do or what the parents want to do or what the students want to do. Right now, it's Ron DeSantis, Charlie Crist, and Nikki Fried. And those three alone will decide the fate of our children, and we can maybe revisit the subject next year.
Claire Heddles, getting back to the Anderson-Carney race, Carney appeared recently on Steve Bannon's podcast. He is a former Trump advisor, far-right activist who's been pressing hard-right conservatives to try to take over local school boards. Bannon was found guilty in July on 2 contempt of Congress charges. He faces potential jail time. What about the way this little school board race in Jacksonville has been nationalized?
Right, so Duval school board races are no-party races. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily know it by the way the candidates are campaigning, but they are no-party candidates. They're not filed with either party, though I think it's clear through the way that Carney, at least, has been advertising her campaign, starting on Steve Bannon's show, going on Fox and Friends, and getting the endorsement from DeSantis. There is definitely conservative politics involved in her race, and that she has positioned herself as the conservative candidate. I will say, as to the Beaches forum that happened earlier this week, if you didn't get a chance to watch that, we have a rundown at jaxtoday.org/vote from my colleague Raymond Troncoso. And then also just the stakes of the election. Most of the elections on the primaries are advancing on to November. The top 2 candidates, both of these school board races are being decided in August.
Which is a much lower turnout affair.
Exactly. So we're having less voters, both of these school board races and this school property tax all being determined, in just a couple weeks.
And in District 6, the other race to watch, Charlotte Joyce, the incumbent, a former teacher and school magnet coordinator, has emphasized careful spending of the school system's $2 billion budget. She has ventured into controversial waters in her first term, facing a lot of criticism when she sponsored a resolution applauding Florida's Parental Rights in Education Act that deals with instruction on gender identity and orientation in the early grades. Mike Mendenhall, your thoughts?
I mean, if you look at Charlotte Joyce's voting record, she typically does end up on the dissenting end of most school board votes when they tend to be controversial or enter into state level politics. I think too, when you look at the governor endorsing these school board candidates, and it really kind of emulates what the GOP's strategy has been nationally for many years now, and that's really to focus on these local races. These lower level elected offices that really have an impact on how our day-to-day lives are governed. You see this in a lot of different states, which ends up allowing them to exercise more authority when it comes to things like redistricting processes for the U.S. House of Representatives. I mean, when they focus on these local races, those people that are elected there tend to work their way up into the state legislatures, into elected office statewide. So, I mean, it really kind of emulates that process.
Yeah. If you're just tuning in, it's our Friday Roundtable. This is our first August show. August is typically the month when most of Northeast Florida makes tracks. A lot of you people are up in the mountains of North Carolina right now, which I think is why we're not getting as many calls. But if there's anyone in town, call us up at 549-2937. It's sort of the Hamptons of the South for people who can make their way up there, Dan Scanlon. Highlands and Cashiers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about the sheriff's race for a minute. That is also on the August 23rd ballot. 4 Democrats, 1 Republican, vying for votes in this shortened calendar. Dan, the former Sheriff Mike Williams had to step down when it emerged that he was not even living in Duval County. He has since left office. Let's talk about the sheriff's race for a minute.
Well, when Sheriff Williams ultimately decided that he had to leave, it suddenly threw these 5 candidates, actually 6 at the time, a year ahead of time, and they had 6-7 weeks to suddenly jumpstart their campaigns. And all 5 finally got together 2 weeks ago at the Istanbul Center, and Claire and I were both there. And it was a fairly moderate tone. Mr. Cummings was a little excitable about certain things, but all 5 of these candidates, black, all 5 of these candidates with serious law enforcement.
Is that now? That's unprecedented, isn't it? Sorry to cut you off. Have we ever had an all African American slate of candidates running for Duval County Sheriff?
Not to my knowledge. Of course, I only date back 30 years. And all 5 of them have worn badges, and all 5 of them, all 4 of the 5 of them have had supervisory. They've had gold badges. They've been in charge of departments, school board police, the airport police. TK Waters is certainly a very visible member of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office till his retirement a few weeks ago. Always the one talking about the police-involved shooting. So very serious candidates there. One also Jefferson, a former public affairs officer, again, very visible. Next week, 2 more debates are scheduled for them. One is the televised debate on Wednesday night, I believe, with JU. Tuesday is a lunchtime Northside Businessman. So there's plenty of chances for people to see or hear about these candidates, but they have 3 weeks before. And probably a runoff, because I doubt among 5 people you're going to get that 50% plus to have a winner. And then they got to run again in a year.
That's right. Let us know who'll get your vote for sheriff. Early voting starts Monday, folks. 5492937. Shelton Hull, TK Waters, the lone Republican in the race. 4 Democrats, Lakeisha Burton, Ken Jefferson, Wayne Clark, and Tony Cummings. Cummings and Jefferson have run before. Lakeisha Burton, the only woman in the race. Who tops the Democratic side of the ledger? Let's assume, for the sake of argument, we go to a runoff against TK Waters and a Democrat yet to be decided.
Well, you've got 5 Democrats and you got TK Waters, so TK Waters wins. The rest is theater. Lakeisha Burton came in first. The idea of a black female sheriff here in Jacksonville is super compelling, especially in the black community, which has never really felt completely comfortable with the police. But then, as often seems to happen when you have a strong female candidate, particularly on the Democratic side in politics in Northeast Florida, there's immediately, soon after, like a flood of new candidates that, can't necessarily explain exactly why they're there, but they know that they have to be there. And I've met most of them. They seem like nice enough people. But if all 5 or 6 of these candidates can, come out of this election on the same page and present a united front to the community and particularly to the streets and the criminal element, that would be great. But as it looks right now, it seems to be just more of the same internal infighting and running around that's left us with a city where, you're more likely to, get to work on time going over the train tracks than you are to ever get caught for shooting someone. And these debates that they're having now, respect to them for having the debates. It's nice that they're being more diligent about doing debates than a lot of other candidates. And it's also nice to live in a city where the police don't run.
Where the police, what do you mean by that?
Oh, where they don't run from danger, where they don't run from criminals.
Oh, I see. You're talking about Texas. Okay.
Where they don't cower behind vehicles while tragedies happen.
I see.
The police here aren't perfect, but at least they're not cowards.
5492937. What are your concerns about public safety and how it will affect your vote for the next sheriff? Claire Heddles, Jacksonville has been Florida's murder capital on and off for decades. Will voters be open to change in the leadership of the local police, or will they opt for a status quo candidate, I think is the question.
Well, I think in one sense, because all of them do have a law enforcement background, all of them have worked in JSO, 4 of them have had supervisory roles. I'm not sure how much any of the candidates are really not a status quo candidate. They're different. They're proposing different platforms than Sheriff Williams, and many of them are proposing, sort of comprehensive, not just after the fact response to crime, but because all of them are deeply rooted in JSO, I'm not sure how much voters really have an option to vote outside of what the status quo is, because they are so embedded in the sheriff's office. I mean, that being said, they do have a wide range of solutions that vary, quite a lot. I think one thing that we are seeing in this race that's interesting is just there's a huge amount of money in the race. Both Burton and TK Waters have raised over $1 million each between their PACs and official campaign funds. So there is a lot of money, a lot of people and interest groups that have invested into this race. And we're going to see, the top two candidates that come out of August continue having to campaign for the next year or so. I mean, they're campaigning again for November, and then they're going to have to run again just 3 months later in March. So lots more debates, a lot of money, and a lot more campaigning ahead before we might see change in JSO.
Dan.
Well, Burton was the first candidate to announce, and she came out of the gate real hard and strong. She got a lot of donations from Democrats and Republicans. But then there was a news conference where Sheriff Williams and TK and John Rutherford were together, and both the ex-sheriff and Rutherford gave their endorsement to TK. So you've got heavy hitters on both sides there. And so I wouldn't be surprised, like Claire and others have said, that those are the two coming out of the primary and then have to run for the runoff.
Let's talk to Mike Mendenhall about the business community for a minute. Jack's Biz, an important arm of the Jacksonville Chamber. You talked about the Chamber a minute ago. They made a rare double endorsement in this sheriff's race. Typically, you would expect them to endorse the Republican. That Republican this time in the race is TK Waters, but they endorsed not only TK Waters, but also Lakeisha Burton.
Yeah, I mean, it like you said, it was a very rare instance that they did that. And I think there's a few factors at play there. For one, the business community, particularly in the executive realm, it's finally starting to show some diversity between men and women. You're seeing more female business leaders. So I think that probably played a bit of a role in Jack's Biz decision to do the dual endorsement and include Lakeisha Burton again. TK Waters, he's been endorsed by Governor Ron DeSantis, and whenever his weight, the governor's weight, and it's heard, his voice is heard, when it comes to the business community in Jacksonville as well as in the chamber. So I think that probably could have had something to do with it as well. But before TK Waters got into the race, there was talk in the business community amongst traditional Republicans of could we support Lakeisha Burton? I think that she was kind of being looked at before TK Waters eventually got into the race.
5492937. Who will get your vote for sheriff? Early voting starts next week. Are you registered? Have you looked at the issues? Make sure you go out and vote. Omar in Duval County. Hi, Omar. Good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning. I'm disheartened and disappointed. I don't believe whoever gets in there can do anything because of the systematic process that we have with our justice system with mass incarceration, where the police go into these neighborhoods and just pick people up off the whims. And that's a big business. It's a lot of money that comes in off of that. So until we change some of these laws to subvert this mass incarceration, I don't think crime or anything else that's what's wanted. They want people to do crimes because it's a big business. So I don't think anything will change. Thank you,
Omar. Thank you. Lots of cynicism about if there is the potential for real criminal justice reform in the 904. Dan.
Well, don't forget that the group called iCare tried unsuccessfully over the past year to meet with Sheriff Williams about civil citations, stating that was a way to not put a criminal record on many undeserving people, and the sheriff ultimately met with them but really didn't want to go that route. Now Sheriff Williams is out. 5 Fresh Voices could potentially be approached by iCare and others about that come in the next year or two. But again, whoever gets elected is going to be busy running a huge department and campaigning. That's going to be a hard job for whoever gets the job. And then they've got another 4 years ahead of them.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, imagine, Shelton, you get elected and then you immediately have to start running for re-election the second you get into office.
Yeah, it's kind of forcing them to do what they would naturally do anyway. It's weird that the governor kind of inserted himself into the sheriff's race, and like he did with the school board thing. I think presumably it's supposed to help these candidates that he claims to support, but as we saw with Trump, there's just as often the opposite effect. This guy has a way of just opening his mouth, and it galvanizes opposition against him. It'll be curious to see how that plays out going forward. Again, it's great that they're having so many debates in this sheriff's race. I wish there was some way to force all of these candidates to have debates much more often. When you have things like the Democratic primary where there's only one debate, and then when we get to the general election, we might only have one debate then, if we're lucky. Of course, Univision downstate, they kind of forced it to happen. When you have like just one debate, you're not going to get good results. These candidates are hashing things out, but I think ultimately this race will kind of reflect the internal disputes within the sheriff's department that is highly factionalized and does not have a clear consensus about future leadership.
We have invited all of the candidates for Duval County Sheriff on this program before the primary. Updates soon to come on that. Some have accepted. We're working out a date. 5492937, Mike in Mandarin. Hi, Mike. Good morning.
Hey, Melissa. So I just wanted to point out Dr. Tony Cummings is the only person running for sheriff who's supportive of a civilian incident review board. Some of the other candidates have said something about how the Florida State Police do investigations and whatnot, but that's like the chicken's guard in the hen house. So I appreciate what Dr. Tony Cummings have had to say and look forward to supporting him.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. Again, go to jaxtoday.org for more about local races and candidates. And a reminder that early voting starts next week. Okay, let's talk for a minute about housing prices. They continue to be a huge challenge across Florida. To try to bring some relief, the city of Jacksonville might let people build small rental residences on their properties with the goal of attacking both inflation and the housing shortage. Legislation introduced by City Councilman Rory Diamond would allow the construction of what are called ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. Diamond would like to see 100,000 of these new rental properties built. The average annual rent in Jacksonville is up 33%. A studio apartment can cost you as much as $1,200 a month. A one bedroom, nearly $1,400 a month. So, Dan Scanlon, this proposal is being well received. Basically, on your property, you build a small structure, you rent it out to someone. It helps you pay your mortgage, and it helps someone else find an affordable apartment.
That is so historic for the Jacksonville market. For decades, there would be a grandma's house in the back of your property because you had enough property to build it. And so you always had that family together. Now we've got the tiny houses movement out there where you can put this cute little 1,000 square footer on wheels, park it, build a base, and it's incredibly smart looking and efficient. So I can see the logic in that. And certainly if that's a way to keep a family member close by but not under your same roof, for some privacy. There's
like a mother-in-law suite,
or
you mean?
An older son or something like that. It is literally a good idea, and it might actually improve some family relationships. Plus, it's fairly inexpensive as long as they're up to building code, have the safety, the fire protection and warning in there, and aren't built of cheap materials.
Yeah, it's already being done in some neighborhoods. Springfield comes to mind. Mike Mendenhall.
Yeah, I think it's also important to point out that, it also takes a lot less time to build one of these smaller structures than it does a multifamily apartment complex, which can actually take, sometimes 2 years because of permitting and sourcing materials and getting, the qualified labor to do it. So it reduce, it's a reduced cost potentially for the renter, but it is also you can build more of them in a short amount of time. So that's part of the housing crisis here in Jacksonville right now, is that we have so many people moving to Jacksonville. I believe sometimes it's like some people said 100 people a day. It actually it becomes infeasible to build as quickly as we need to.
We see a lot of new apartment complexes going up across the city, Claire Heddles, but again, are they affordable? A one-bedroom apartment, the price for that has gone up in 1 year 22% in the city of Jacksonville. $1,400 a month for a one-bedroom is out of reach for a lot of folks.
Right, and we are seeing all of these new apartments. So there was a good column from Bill Delaney this week or last week about how, it's okay to have these high-priced apartments. It's great to increase the housing stock, but there also has to be lower rent as well that's accompanying it. And, ADUs may be part of the solution. I think there's other solutions people are looking at in terms of short-term rent relief for residents. I've covered the House District 14 forum this week, and all of the candidates mentioned the Sadowski Fund, this state housing trust fund, and how to get more of that money back to Jacksonville. So
it helps people afford housing,
right,
essentially.
to afford housing and to get more affordable housing units. There's also, this potential ordinance in Orange County and Orlando to pass a 1-year rent control ordinance. That'd be the first time there's a rent control ordinance in the state of Florida since the 70s. So I think there are some other precedents that we might see for short-term rent relief, but things like ADUs may be part of the long-term solution.
Shelton Hall, it's doubtful we'd see a rent control ordinance proposed in Jacksonville. But what about some of these other ideas?
Well, I think at this point, I think people are open to any solution that might work. The tiny houses thing is a great concept. I first saw some of those over at Eco Relics a few years ago, and I was worried earlier because there was some suggestion that people might actually look at using tiny houses to house the homeless, and you know how angry people get when you think of ideas that might help the homeless. So let's make sure everyone understands that this is also a great opportunity.
A little irony
profit.
from you. I'm just making sure people understand. Yeah, go ahead.
We have a homeless problem for a reason.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of the technology, the things that people are doing with these tiny houses now, it's incredible. And I think a lot of people, especially younger people, young single people, are going to really embrace this concept. If I had a bunch of money, I would buy like a large lot in some really interesting part of town and open that up for a bunch of hipster tiny homes. I think whatever city in Florida starts to jump on that first is going to make a ton of money and probably use that money to buy houses and overinflate the value and use it for Airbnb.
Oh yeah, that's another wrinkle. How that is distorting the market. A listener from North Carolina, listening in from the mountains. I mentioned the North Carolina mountains earlier. He said the Boone area of our mountains is full. It's too cold for you Floridians, and Bigfoot likes to snack on you, and we have bears too. Stay home. He doesn't want anyone moving up there from here. Funny. Okay, let's talk about another item from the week. Nearly 350 lawsuits have been filed against a former orthopedic surgeon in Jacksonville, alleging he caused hundreds of injuries while operating with a neurological condition that caused him to slur his speech and lose his balance. Dr. David Heekin formerly practiced at Ascension St. Vincent's Riverside Hospital and the Heekin Clinic. He relinquished his license last year after a state board of medicine investigation. Dan Scanlon, shocking story.
We used to call St. Vincent's the hospital that ate Riverside because it was such a sprawling complex, but it was the hospital that didn't show up in the headlines. It was UF, it was Baptist, it was Mayo that was doing all the big development and all the medical stuff. I can only think of one or two stories I've done at St. Vincent's. So to me, it was always the traditional hospital. Mm-hmm. And I'm surprised that a traditional hospital would, according to this lawsuit, ignore multiple staff and doctor and nurse complaints about a physician who is having apparent obvious issues. And then we find out that we have in this lawsuit one death, multiple injuries, even broken bones attributed. If you've ever watched a surgery, and I know it's gruesome, you have a millimeters room to work. One movement and you nick a blood vessel, you nick a nerve. If you're having a physical issue, I think that multiplies the danger. And if you're a patient and see your doctor, as the person we interviewed in the Times-Union said, couldn't be understood because they were slurring their words, I would think you would find another doctor.
In lawsuits, plaintiffs say St. Vincent's billed millions for surgeries performed by Heekin over the years and that they didn't protect patients from an unfit surgeon so that they could continue to profit from it. Mike Mendenhall, attorneys for these plaintiffs say they'd been bringing their concerns to the hospital for years, but the health system never stopped him from operating.
Yeah, and I mean, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really I speak to the legality of what could happen between either the doctor or Ascension St. Vincent. But I think that when you have something like this in the headlines, hospitals they really depend on their reputation, and that's really the gold standard of their marketing. And so I think that having something like this out there, something that's like this alleged, it becomes difficult, especially in a town like Jacksonville that has so many different hospital systems. When you're constantly competing with the UF or Baptist Health or Mayo Clinic, that you have to maintain that good standing with the public.
Okay, let's talk for a minute about football. The Jags faced off against the Raiders in the Hall of Fame game last night in Canton, Ohio. At the same time, former Jaguar Tony Baselli will finally be inducted into the Hall of Fame this weekend. The first player from the franchise to receive the honor. Of course, he was the first ever draft pick in Jaguars history. Shelton Hall, he's the first Pro Football Hall of Famer in team history as well. This has been a long effort to get Baselli into the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely, and he deserves it. In the NFL, we always hear a lot of bad stories about NFL players, people that are abusive and cheaters and scandals and all that. Respect to the Jaguars for being, much, much better than a lot of NFL teams. Respect to them for having former players that stay in the community and continue supporting us. Congratulations to Baselli. Hopefully in the next 5 years, we can maybe get Fred Taylor and Jimmy Smith in there. And congratulations also to Leroy Butler, born and raised here in Jacksonville, also a recent member of the NFL Hall of Fame. It's unfortunate that the Jaguars didn't play much better last night, but
hope springs eternal, right?
We've got the rest of the year to complain about them. Let's appreciate the good times right now.
That's right. With all of that said, let's round up stories that might have missed your attention this week. Yes, it's our lightning round, everybody. There it is. We can't do the lightning round without that. Hey, did you hear Mayor Curry has started a podcast like most other people on planet Earth these days? It's called Mic Drop with MLC. Now, the mayor does appear to be using city resources to promote his new podcast. We will take a closer look at that on this program at a future date. Claire Heddles, what's on your mind?
Well, we've hammered it home, but I'll say it one more time. Early voting starts Monday. Make your voter game plan. And we dropped 3 new voter guides on Jax Today this morning. That's jaxtoday.org/vote to make a plan to start voting next week.
That's right, folks. Get out and vote. Dan Scanlon, what's on your radar?
I'd like to urge you, if you're going to vote actually on August 23rd, the primary day. There may not be a lot of folks there. You may actually brighten the life of your poll worker, but it's a great visual to see how our system works. And just then that night, watch how the numbers tally up and maybe nudge a few of your neighbors to do it too.
Yeah, I think the sheriff's race is going to nudge turnout up much higher than it might normally
in certain precincts, I'm sure.
Mike Mendenhall, what's going on in your world?
Well, something that some of the school board candidates that are running might have to just make a decision on. Kind of quietly behind the scenes, the school district has narrowed their choices to for developers and real estate companies to help them move their headquarters off the river. They've been going through this ITN process, and which eventually could result in them having a new headquarters and their current space being sold to a development company.
That's right. Thank you for that update. Shelton Hall, what's up in your neck of the woods?
Oh, it's just a fun, happy weekend. Certainly go out and vote. Vote early, vote often, as they say. Let me make a quick bold prediction. If Nikki Fried loses the Democratic primary, Ron DeSantis will be the next president of the United States, January 2025. Mark it on your calendar. I'm not happy about that, but it is what it is.
Well, we'll have to see if that comes true. And then in the meantime, I want to make one more contribution to our lightning round. This weekend on our medical show, What's Health Got to Do with It? Host Dr. Joe Servin of the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville discusses all of your back-to-school health care concerns. What's Health Got to do with it airs Saturday at 4 p.m. and Sundays at 9 p.m. right here on 89.9 FM. And thank you so much to our fabulous foursome, Dan Scanlon, Claire Heddles, Mike Mendenhall, and political prognosticator Shelton Hull. And we'll see if you're right, Shelton.
I hope not.
Well, and so some people hope yes. We will see. But thank you all, guys. It's great to see you in studio. I think this is the fullest house we've had in the studio since the pandemic began. So great to see your faces.
Shelton, come home. Shelton, come home.
Okay.
I'm on my way, Daddy.
A quick break, and when we come back, celebrating the Jack's Next 100, coming up all 5 days next week at the Jesse Ball DuPont Center. What's going to be happening with that? Keep listening. We'll be right back.
Managing your child's mental and physical health as they head back to school. I'm Dr. Joe Servin. Join me tomorrow at 4 for What's Health Got to Do with It, only on WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville.
On his latest album, singer-songwriter Kevin Morby tackles mortality with songs that range in influence from gospel to blues and folk to garage rock and more. Hear Morby's latest along with all the best new music on the independent 89.9 HD4.
Science Friday. How do we build for the climate extremes that are coming? Even our most basic infrastructure.
We don't quite know how big to make the pipe under the road. We can't necessarily afford it.
Roads, drains, and power grids. Building and paying for the new normal. All on Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
This afternoon at 3 here on WJCT News 89.9.
Kansas delivers a referendum shock while President Biden takes down the leader of al-Qaeda.
Justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more.
And a Texas judge lays down the law to Alex Jones.
Just because you claim to think something is true does not make it true.
Much more on the Friday News Roundup next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, the Jesse Ball DuPont Center is hosting something cool next week, the Jack's Next 100 Initiative, a 5-day celebration of this city's past, present, and future with an arts, music, film, and literary festival. Now, the celebration will also feature some educational components, including an artist salon. This will help local artists navigate the ins and outs of running a small business in the arts. We're pleased to welcome on the line Josue Cruz, Interim Director of Development with the Cultural Council of Greater Jacksonville. Good morning.
Good morning, Melissa. Thank you for having me on.
Good to be with you. Also on the line, Houston Poland, Director of the Small Business Development Center with the Coggin College of Business at UNF. Hey,
Hi,
Houston.
Melissa.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah,
thanks for letting me join you.
Good to have you both. Josue Cruz, let's start with you. Tell us all about the Jack's Next 100. What's going to be going on at the Jesse?
Right on. So the Jack's Next 100 is a week-long celebration that was the brainchild of the 90 Forward and the Jesse. And it was how to look forward to Jacksonville from the bicentennial. So it kind of serendipitously fell in the same time frame, but then again, there was a purposefulness to it. It'll be from Tuesday through Saturday. There's going to be events that are going to be going on at 5 p.m. every day. So it's every day at 5 p.m. at the Jesse Ball DuPont Center. We have on Tuesday we have the Artist Salon. On Wednesday we have the Winterland Music Festival, or the Winterland Music Presents Past and Future. On Thursday we have the LOL Film Awards, which folks submitted films to be judged here. We'll have the Literary Festival on Friday, and then on Saturday, the Moving the Margins Gallery downstairs at the Jesse is going to be hosting a new exhibit. So it's a 5-day celebration about, what do we look forward to for the next 100 years of Jack's.
Really cool. Houston Poland, Coggin College of Business at UNF. Let's talk about the Artist Salon. helping artists with creative entrepreneurship, how to build a better arts business. This sounds interesting. And tell us about your Coggin College's interest in this piece of it.
Oh, absolutely. You know, entrepreneurship it comes in so many different forms, so many different ways. When you think of the arts and you think of music, you don't necessarily automatically think entrepreneurship, but truly there is a huge, huge, huge component to the music and arts industries in entrepreneurship. I mean, entrepreneurship comes in so many different forms, whether it's an independent contractor, somebody who's, you know, a performer who is out there doing a lot of contract work. All of those things are considered entrepreneurship. And for us at the Small Business Development Center and for Coggin College, I mean, we're very focused on making sure that we support our entrepreneurial ecosystem in all industries, in all aspects of how people engage in business. So this is very, very near and dear to not just my heart, but so many of us, because it's something that helps support our community and allows it to thrive, not just from an economic, a business standpoint, but from an art standpoint as well, which is so critical to our community and economic development as a whole.
That's interesting. Josue, you know, a thriving artistic community is good for a city's bottom line.
Absolutely. I mean, you're talking about, you know, here at the Cultural Council of Greater Jacksonville, one of our 3 pillars that we stand on is igniting the creative economy. And the creative economy actually serves as an economic driver for the city. You're talking about events that are happening around the city, which not only benefit the actual event and the artist, but that spills over to the restaurants, to the shops, to the bars that and businesses that are surrounding these events. So it's a spillover effect that has a direct economic impact on our city. And we are, the creative economy is an economic driver to the growth of our city. So we're really excited to be able to partner with the Jesse. And again, at the Cultural Council of Greater Jacksonville, you know, it is one of our foundational pillars.
Okay, so with all of that said, Houston, you know, people have 5 nights to pick from, but they need to pick one of them at least and come out and be part of this.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I'm just going to off of after what you just said, Jose, and that is that the creative economy is so important. It's so critical. And if you had to pick a night next week to go, if you only have one, I would definitely pick Artist Salon's night, because that is a time to be able to come out and actually see what it's about. And I'm really, really excited, because that's going to be an opportunity for us to talk specifically about what we're discussing here, and that's, you know, the creative economy, arts entrepreneurship, how it can be supported, how it can thrive, and truly, you know, also understand what resources are available to support people who are interested in that. And I'm so excited that the SBDC will be involved, because you'll get to hear about the resources that we have available as well that are free to the public. So I'm very, very excited about this, and I definitely would encourage that being the night if you had to pick one.
Josue, go ahead. How can people learn more about Jack's Next 100?
Absolutely. You can go to thejesse.org/Jack's Next 100. You can also go to the culturalcouncil.org website and learn more about the Jack's Next 100 for next week's event. You'll see it around social media platforms as well. But definitely get a chance to come out there on Tuesday for the Creative Entrepreneurship Artist Salon. We're going to talk about building better art businesses, and we're going to continue the conversation about igniting the creative economy. So we hope to see you all there, and by all means, please reach out to the Cultural Council of Greater Jacksonville to RSVP. And even if you don't have a chance to RSVP, come out and join us 5 o'clock on Tuesday and 5 o'clock every day next week.
Check it out, folks. Thanks, Josue Cruz, Cultural Council, and Houston Pullen, Coggin College of Business at UNF. Have fun, guys.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for having me.
And that's our show. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to join me again today at noon for the Florida Roundup, our live statewide call-in program, rounding up the biggest stories across the Sunshine State each week. I'm Melissa Ross. This is First Coast Connect. We'll be back Monday at noon. Have a great weekend.
Fantasize Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.